Hi, I'm Randy Williams, and I'm back again with more on Chum Q. Not more on Chum Q like for idiots, but more on the Chum Q form. Now, when we train in the Chum Q form, we have a little bit different focus than we have in Siulim Tao. We think about our applied structure, that is using the motions in actual combat against an opponent. We think about footwork, kicking, and most importantly, bridging with the opponent. Now, at the Chum Q level, we're introduced to what are called the Sup Chut Yu, or the 17 musts of Wing Chun, and I'd like to read those to you. You must be ferocious when clashing. Hands and feet must be coordinated. The fist must be fast. Movements must be agile. Power must be used to release strength. The principles of yin and yang must be comprehended. Timing must be accurate. The spirit must remain calm. Trapping hands must be continuous. Breathing and strength must be steady. Some of your strength must be kept in reserve. Internal strength must be sunken. Your own posture must be protected. The fighting demeanor must be commanding. Eye power and focus must be sharp. A fight must end quickly. The waist and stance must be united. All right, next I'm going to talk about Choma Bongsao, or stance pivot with the wing arm deflection. So from right here, what I'm doing is pivoting and driving my wrist forward down the center line. So I've gone from a side reference here to a front reference, pivoted. So I did a 90-degree pivot of my feet like I've been doing, but I only pivoted my body 45 degrees instead of the full 180. Now, this is introducing us to the yang blocking reference. This is telling us that all of our yang blocks reference to the center line. In other words, in Siulim Tao, Bongsao went right there. Well, in Chum Q, it still goes there, but it just becomes a little bit longer. So now we're talking about having Lansao, Bongsao, and the punch to help us introduce how the concept of reference distinguishes between yin motions and yang motions from Siulim Tao. Now, you remember in my previous tape series I talked about the concept of reference, and I mentioned the arc of power and the way that when we pivot we create this arc in front of us. Now, if you would imagine that arc being bisected by a line, that line being the center line, any movement that goes up to and including that center line is yang, or positive in nature. But once it passes that line, it becomes negative, receiving, yin in nature. So certain movements in Wing Chun sort of latch onto the positive side of the power arc. Other movements latch onto the negative side of the power arc. Those movements are yin. The movements that latch onto the positive side are yang. The easiest way to understand that is if you imagine a merry-go-round and there's 4 kids on it. Well, if the first kid jumps off right here, he's going to fly that way. If the second kid jumps off there, he's going to fly that way. The third kid jumps off here, he goes that way, and the fourth kid jumps off here, he goes that way. It's one circle providing the power, but it's shooting off power in all different directions. And when I pivot, that arc of power is going in a complete 180-degree cycle. Now, you remember how I talked about the golf swing last time and the way you put the ball right in front of you, swinging to get your most power, you'd be right at the tip of the arc. And then it slows down to finally stop. So you don't want to put your ball here because you're cheating yourself. And you don't want to put it there because you're starting to slow down already. The punch is the same thing, but instead of being in front of you on the ground, it's in front of you here. So what you want to do with a punch is drive it to the ultimate sweet spot of that power arc, which is the center line. Now, the same thing with this Bongsao. What I'm trying to do here is drive it straight ahead down the center line to its ultimate power point. Whereas with the Lansao, I'm pulling it back and it's staying referenced to the self-center line, staying referenced to my body. You remember last time when I talked about the concept of reference, I told you how the yin motions stay referenced to the body the same way they did in the Siulim Tao form, whereas the yang motions stayed referenced to the center line the same way they did in the Siulim Tao form. So this movement here should bring that out a little bit more, and this is where you'd really be introduced to that concept that I talked about in the previous tape series. Now, you also notice when I do the Bongsao, I have my Wu Sao held kind of pulled back. You know, it's kind of got that cow sao vibe going. It's kind of got that bovine vibe going there. The reason being, when I have my partner in, if I use Bongsao as a defense here, what I don't want is for my Wu Sao to be sticking up like that because John can just grab it and pull punch me. See? Now, I don't want that. I want to make it a little bit harder for him to get to my hand so he can't reach it. It's down here. It's not as accessible. It's also spring-loaded, so I can come right in with that second punch and just unleash that spring. So there's the 2 main reasons why we hold the hand in a cow sao-like structure. Now, something else about that block as a defense. Now, as I talked about before, when I use Bongsao here as a defense, what I want to try to do is get my wrist the height of John's throat. When I close one eye and look down, I should not see John's throat. If I can't see his throat because my wrist is blocking it, that means that my punch, or rather my block, is going to be effective. If, on the other hand, I can see John's throat when I close one eye, it means John can hit me. So I need to get that hand up high enough to where I know that I'm going to be able to slip the punch and be safe. Now that comes with practice. Obviously, you're not going to close one eye all the time when you're fighting, unless you're like Popeye or something. But most people would keep both eyes open. But the idea is you learn how it should feel, and after some time you don't need to think about that anymore. This is just how you can learn it. Now, if you take and blend this Chum Bong Sao position here with the Lap Sao Loi Fan Kun that's going to come at the end of the form. At the end of my form, you're going to see I do this here. Now, if you take and blend those two pieces together, you've got the Lap Sao cycle hidden right inside the Chum Kyu form. The Lap Sao cycle being right here. And we talked plenty about that in the previous tape series. So that's the idea for the Lap Sao cycle is right there hidden, within the form here. Now, some other ways besides the obvious block that you could use, this principle for, is the idea of Bong and Wu here can also be blended together with the Jeep Sao principle I talked about before to create a neck-breaking usage of Bong Sao. Now let's say we're open and John gives me the jab. Here, once I've come in with this hit here, I can use the Wu Sao and Bong to break his neck. Now John broke his neck when he was 17 and he hasn't looked back since. Now what I have here is Wu Sao being used here to trap the shoulder and Bong mixed with gum as a strike. So you got all kinds of principles being blended together here. But that's what Wing Chun's about. It's about knowing these ideas, these individual ideas that go in the form, and then cleverly mixing them together to create other techniques that don't actually appear in the form except in idea or combination of principle. Now, some of the other things I want to talk about with the Bong Sao is that the fact that here, going from Lan Sao to that, shows me the different degrees of body pivoting that I can get with my footwork. In other words, you've already seen that I can pivot yay much, and my body pivoted all that much. Okay, that was a 180-degree pivot of the body. You also saw, with the Chama Che-kun, you also saw that I could pivot my body only 45 degrees dead in front while my feet pivot 90. And here, you're also seeing that I can pivot 45 degrees for a 90-degree pivot of the feet. The difference being this time, my reference is different. It starts at the side and goes to the center. So they're telling you can start at the side, go to the center, go from center to either half of either side or fully to one side to the other. So you've got all this different choice to choose from. All right, next I'm going to talk again about Bong pulling to Lan, the action of Bong pulling to Lan. For one thing, in Chi Sao, I use, as I showed before, Bong pulling to Lan. There's a proverb in Wing Chun, Lan Sao is nothing but Bong Sao moving backward. And in that case, what I did from my Bong here was I just pulled across to open up that line. So this is one of the times when you use, Lan Sao, right after Bong Sao contact. Now, it kind of keeps his ribs open in certain cases when you're trying to hit the body. By pulling upwards, again, as I said before, you don't want to block that line by pulling down to your hip. So sometimes you use Lan Sao this way. Now, we have a Yet Fuk Yi combination that we can practice here, where I go Bong, Lan Da Chao Kun, Bong, Bong, Lan Da Chao Kun, Bong. So it goes like 1, 2, and 1. But you do have to be careful when you do Lan Sao here that you don't end up eating that elbow shot. So whenever you use Lan Sao, you have to do it with some care. All right, next I'm going to talk about Ngoi Doi Gat Kun, outward diagonal punch. Now you notice that when I do this in the form, my hand is in Lan Sao structure. I place this whole two-way chambered up structure from Yechi Chunkin in the first form right here with my knuckles facing straight ahead. And I place it there and then I scrape it across and pull across. It's kind of got a back fist vibe going there, but it's not a back fist. It still hits with the knuckles. Now this is one of the 8 punches of Wing Chun, the diagonal punch. Now the reason it's called a diagonal punch, it's a lot like a cross in boxing in the respect that once your hand is here, you're actually like pulling across and punching across the guy's arm. So this is the primary application, is going across the line to clock him this way. Now it's also used to exclude from bridge contact when his arm is on top and has the center line. In fact, there's a proverb in Chum Kyu that says when the opponent's bridge enters, counter it with your own bridge from above. So one of the things that you can do here is, for example, when I'm open, and say, for example, I jab and he does a jam sao, which is well structured. He has the line, his bridge is on top. outward diagonal punch will exclude or push him out and give you the line back. Now again, open. If he jabs and I do bong, but he's still kind of got control of the center line, again, thread that punch through to exclude. So this is another way that we can use it. Now, a time when I like to do it in sticky hands, if my opponent has what we call gipjang, where his elbow is sticking way in too far, what I'll do then is exclude that with the outward diagonal punch in the same way. So there's a lot of different ways to use it in that manner. And you can also exclude with it against the 1-2. Let's say we're open, and he gives me the 1-2. I might go jam and then exclude with that second punch. So what I did was stop the first one with jam and then excluded that second one out, hitting him. And that left me set up nicely for another diagonal punch pull across. Now, the diagonal punch itself and the relationship that it puts you in introduces the idea of what we call outside facing, or ngoi sin wai. Now, outside facing is really, there's a stance that we call outside facing. But more than anything, outside facing is a concept. It's a relationship that you get in more than it is an actual movement. But in outside facing, let's say, for example, Keith is in a stance. You remember in the wooden dummy tape I talked about walking in a semicircle around the dummy. Well, in this case, I'm going to walk in a semicircle around this dummy. Now what I'll do here is to show you the different possible relationships. Facing straight on, okay, I can pivot to one side or the other to this much, 45 degrees to either side. I have a maximum of 90 degrees, which I can face him without giving him my dead side, which is what I talked about in the previous tape series. Now, by stepping on the semicircle here, I also have this outside facing relationship and what's known as an inside facing relationship. So I have all this spectrum of movement to where I'm still safe enough without exposing the dead side. And again, back on the semicircle, you remember this, and again on the semicircle, I have, once again, outside facing relationship and inside facing relationship, all of which are still safe fighting positions. But once I pass beyond either of those sort of spectrums of pivoting, either that way or that way, I end up giving up what I call my live area so that he can hit me a lot easier. All right, next I'm going to talk about Jingma Funsao. Now, what's important with Jingma Funsao, first of all, is that as I go across, my feet stop, but my hands keep going, and my eyes stay focused right on the fingertips. That develops what's called mot lik, or eye focusing power. You want to be able to stay focused on that thing as fast as it's moving, because it's actually like moving so fast it sizzles a little bit. And you want to be able to keep your eyes focused on that so that, in the midst of furious combat, you can focus on things that are coming in fast without getting all freaked out, so you can remain calm. There's a saying in Wing Chun, Wai Mo Ngan Sun, Ba Sai Tun. Eyes beaming with courage can control the situation. That kind of leads to what we call emotion trapping. When your eyes look like you control the situation, some people, can be intimidated by that, and that could be part of a factor of winning or losing a fight. Now, there's another one of the 17 musts of Wing Chun, Ngan San Yu Gao, which means eye power and focus must be sharp. See, I guess Wing Chun's a lot like music, because you have to C sharp or you'll B flat. But anyway, your eyes should be trained to be sharp in the Chum Kyu form. All right, another one of the proverbs of Wing Chun is Ngan San Lin Dak Jing, which means the eyes are trained to be sharp. And even another proverb about the eyes, there's so many because it's very important. Yi do ngan do, sao gyok gan. What that means is where the mind goes, the eyes go, and the hands and feet follow. So it's a very important part of Wing Chun to have that eye focusing power, the ability to stay focused on something that's moving fast and not to sort of lose your focus or your calm. All right, next I'm going to talk about the whip down to fuksao from the funsao. Now, you notice that my hand sort of sizzles the air. You want to get that hand to whip back down. So what you do in order to accomplish that is to bring the elbow in first and then the hand down. So what we're learning to do is to learn to whip the tip of the hand. Don't use the tip of the whip to whip the handle. Use the handle to whip the whip. So it helps you get your hand in quick by bringing the elbow in. That also, gets your elbow in to protect your body quick as well. Now this is more of the combat usage of fuksao. You know how earlier, you've seen this fuksao. But this version is the one that we use more for actual combat, the way that we actually block in a fight situation or even in combat sticky hands. It's more of a catch-up usage, kind of like Muay Jetsao and Kao Sao were in the first form. Let's say like when we're open. When he comes in with the jab, I use it this way. It kind of goes inward and downward, and it sort of sucks him in a lot like Jetsao would, same kind of structure. So like it just goes here. And you can see how it catches up because my hand is extended first before it comes in. And I used my elbow in first to whip the hand in. Now, it's an adductive movement. In other words, it comes inwards from a full extension. And in that respect, it comes into ground fighting because when we're on the floor, we don't have the same kind of leverage and body structure and legs to push off from to get power. So in general, on the floor, we use adductive hand and foot motion that's a little bit more powerful. Now let's say I'm on my back here. Maybe Gavin's on top of me choking me. Okay, now one of the times when I might use that type of an adductive motion is to get him in close here. I might use it to hit here on the back of his neck or on the back of his kidney. You know, I'm also using it here to trap the hands or bring him close to me. Once I get him in close, I can start whacking him with that. You see, I get a different degree of power with that type of a motion because on the floor, you don't have the same push-off power that you would normally have. Now, another time that you might use this type of a movement, this whip down into futsal as a strike, could be when a person ducks out your funsal to begin with. So let's say we're closed. Let's say that I did funsal and Gavin ducked it out. I could come back with that second shot and then follow it with the tutsal-like motion, because after all in the form, I go like that. You know, I'm coming in here, snapping down, and then here. Well, it'd be very similar to me chopping and having him duck it, coming back and catching him on the way in, and then following that with the tutsal type of vibe. All right, next I'm going to talk about the tutsal motion, or freeing hand, here, which is a little bit different than the Siu Lim Tao version of tutsal. Because in Siu Lim Tao, you know, both fingers pointed at the floor, and both hands ended up straight, wrists ended up straight at the end. Whereas in the Chum Kiu version of tutsal, you're coming down here and you're snapping into a bent wrist here. So you're getting kind of a combination not only of the twist that you learned before, but you're getting a snap of the wrist combined with the twist. So remember how I talked about funsal before? I was saying that, you know, a regular funsal was just like this, and adding some twist to it helped give it a little bit more power. But now, taking and adding twist and wrist snap gives it that little bit of extra oomph that you want at Chum Kiu level. So you're getting another element there with this tutsal, because you're getting to emphasize that wrist snap, which they didn't let you do at Siu Lim Tao. They figured it was enough for you to learn just how to get the twist into it without trying to add that extra element. All right, another way that we use the tutsal is to use our own arm to simulate someone else's, because you know how you're scraping down here against your own arm. So you get the feeling of what it's like to rub against someone else's arm. Now, in a situation where, say Bob gave me the jab, normally here, if I had done jam, what I would want to do is just take over the trap and chop with that free hand. You know, I wouldn't want to slide my arm along his, because all that would be doing is warning him that it was coming in and slowing my chop down. But in a situation where, for example, he had done a pak punch and had control of this bottom arm, now I don't have the option of grabbing that hand. So that's when I'd want to use that tutsal vibe, because I'd want to slide along the guy's arm and make sure that he's not hitting me with that hand. So in a case like that, you kind of have to use it there. Now another time when you use the tutsal feeling is another version of lapsao. When Bob gives me the punch here from bong, I kind of like scrape down my arm here into that lapsao. So I can use the tutsal feeling here to scrape down my arm into that hit. All right, next I'm going to talk about lansao jing gyok. What I do here is open my hand and kick and then pull my legs straight down. Now I won't even talk about the next part of it yet, but I open the hand, turn my body square, close the fist with a hammer fist structure as I kick, then I jerk the leg straight down to the heel. And then later on I'm going to come up with the bong set, which I'll talk about later. Now the first thing that does is it brings in that hammer fist. Now it shows you to put your thumb on the very inside here instead of wrapping your hand across. Most of the time when you punch in Wing Chun, you have a flat hand and then a closed fist. But in hammer fist structure, you close the fist and you support the fist from the top. That's because in a regular punch, the force is going this way, so you want to support your knuckles. But in a hammer fist, this force is going upward, so you want to support from the top this way. So this is introducing you to the hammer fist formally. Now, something else this does is it teaches you the first of the two kicking structures in Wing Chun, which is a straight body and a 45-degree body. Now, in other words, here, my body is square to the wall, just like it was earlier with lansao. And then I'm doing the front kick. Now, what they're showing you is that when you do jing gyuk, or front kick, that your shoulders are square to the target you're kicking. In other words, I'm square and I kick with my shoulders square to the target. Now later on, you're going to learn a 45-degree body structure that comes with the side kick. But this is the first of the two kicking structures. Now, one of the ways that I use this with Kenny, the exact motion from the form, let's say that I've come in and he's blocked me with whatever. What I can do then is grab, line, and kick. So what I'm really doing here, if you notice when I went like this, it's like I have one hand pulled back, one hand pulling across, and I kick. What they're saying is, one hand pulling back, one hand pulling across, and that opens up for the squareness to kick with. So that's one of the ways that I'd want to use that. Now, another way that I might want to use this is a simultaneous block and kick. So you can add a kick to a hand motion. This is the first time you really get to do that in the Wing Chun system. The Chum Kyu form introduces you to the idea of kicking at the same time as you use your hands. So let's say we're open. Now, what I might want to do here is the jab comes, and then as the cross comes, Lan Sao Jing Gyo, the same exact way. So slowly I went here, and then I pulled across and kicked. So they're showing you can block and kick at the same time. Now, you could follow up with a number of different retraps or anything else from there. For example, I go with the 1, 2, then I might fall an elbow and finish him with an upward elbow attack, then sweep him if I wanted to get rid of him. Now, another way that I might want to use my jet gyuk, or you notice the way I put my leg down after the kick. I don't know if I showed it, but after having kicked, you want to jerk your leg straight down rather than bend it and set it down. And the reason for that is it's introducing you to what's called jet gyuk, or jet leg. Not jet leg, but jet leg. Jerking foot. Now, the jerking foot's used in a number of ways. For one thing, it's used to stop a guy from kicking me when I have my leg in the air. Let's say I had done, let's get closed. Let's say I had done something similar where I had been kicking here and Kenny was trying to kick my base leg out. That's when I would jut his leg out. So it takes his balance right out. Of course, you could just kick that hand out if you wanted to spoil his day. So you can use it in that way. You can use it to break down the guy's stance. For example, we're closed. Let's say I had come in and, I don't know, just grabbed and kicked. I can jut that leg just to break the stance down, And there's another way that I could apply that jut leg. One of the less commonly seen uses for the jut is as an attack. Let's say, for example, why don't you get on this side? Let's say, for example, when we're open, okay, and I've stopped that first attack here with bong, and the next one with tanda here, trap the guy's neck, jut it like that to take his stance from behind. Another one, let's say we're closed. Sometimes when I get like really close with my opponent, and I'm dead close with him, too close to kick, I'll use this here just to whack him right in the schwanz. So, it's an effective attack. Now, on the floor, there's tons of uses for jet leg. It's an adductive move, just like I talked about earlier with futsal, moving into the body. Jut leg moves into the body. So when you're on the floor, for example, a situation like this, you can use your leg to whack the spine here in a number of different ways, or in different relationships. Depends. You don't know where you're going to be. You can use it here to attack the spine. I might use it here on the back of the neck. If I got him onto his back, I might want to use it to the face. I might want to use it to the groin here. So you can use it to smack downwards to attack on the floor. All right, another time when I use the idea of Lan Sao Jing Gyok, simultaneous block and kick, would be like in the Lap Sao cycle if I want to insert kicks. For example, if we're doing the Bu Sao switch, right here, Bu, Wu, Bong, kick. That last movement that I just did, okay, let's do that slow. See, I did the same Bu Sao defense as always, and here, but because I'm doing Bong, and it's a yang motion, well, yang motion hogs up all the yang power, so I can't punch during that, but I can still kick, and that's where I'd want to insert that. All right, next I'm going to talk about Siang Ma Bong Sao. Now you notice that after I kick here, my leg goes straight down to the heel and kind of pulls me up to a slide into Bong Sao with the arms up. Notice my forearms are parallel in this position. And what this kind of does is it forces momentum into the Bong Sao. In other words, like I'm up and it forces extra momentum falling into the Bong Sao. This is used a lot of times, like after you kick someone, you have to be able to be prepared to block. Let's say, for example, we're closed like this, and I've kicked Mark. He goes to punch me on the way down. I need to be prepared to defend against whatever he might do as I'm falling forwards. Now it also shows you about a change of reference because you were faced this way, you kicked, and then you landed that way. Changing reference versus a single opponent. For example, in the Lapsao cycle, if I'm going to do the Chang Dai Jiang switch with a kick here, well, what I did there was I hit at the same time as I kicked, and as I had to react to Mark's punch, I had to change reference with Bong Sao as I landed. Now, landing in Siang Ma Bong Sao also helps bring to mind the idea of changing reference in relation to more than one opponent. So, for example, with two guys, if I had to deal with it this way, what I did was actually slow motion. I came in here, kicked Mark, sent him back. As I fell, I dealt on a totally different line with Bobby, and then Mark was coming back, so I just put the icing on the cake. All right, next I'm going to talk about Chum Kyu, or the sinking bridge. Now, it's not exactly the same as the name of the form, Chum Kyu, but it's a homophone in Chinese. In this case, it means sinking bridge. What they mean by a sinking bridge is when the opponent thinks he's got a bridge to step on, and you drop out from under him. That's called a sinking bridge. It has its roots in the Quan Sao motion at the beginning of Siu Lim Tao. Now, when you take the sinking bridge principle and you blend it together with the Dai Bong Sao principle, let's say we're closed. When Bobby does Pak Da against me, here, the idea of letting my hand flop down to the low Bong Sao position, that is a sinking bridge. Instead of being all stiff when he does it and me just getting jerked, what I do instead is let it drop down. So I give him butter. Instead of him expecting, he expects the arm to be stiff, I just let it flop down, and that makes it a lot easier for me to get my other hand up to block. Now, I use it as kind of a joint locking catch of the arm, sometimes like in sticky hands. What I'll do here is, I'll try to induce him to punch me here. And when he does, I'll meet him with that Chum Kyu. What I did here was, I attack low, and I know from his training he's going to want to do Gang Da. And when he does, like I'm waiting for him. And then, again, I'm here. In fact, sometimes in sticky hands, I'll actually, I'll score, and I'll sit there and I'll go and wait for that thing so I can score it, just because I know that punch is going to come, and I know what I can do to it. Now, another time I might use that Chum Kyu motion is, let's say, for combat, let's say we're closed, and Bobby gives me the jab. If I can slip over here and straighten his arm, what I'll do is knock his hand off to the side of my shoulder. That straightens his arm out. Then I can meet it here with the Chum Kyu and come in that way with the follow-up. Now, we also have a drill called the attack cycle. I showed you one in the previous form, this time open. What we do is just repeat one pattern over and over to help you develop the moves. So in this case, the punch comes here, I'll grab and hit, then I'll use the Chum Kyu, and then hewn it out. Then it'll start again. Bong, hit, Chum Kyu, hit. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 3. All right, next I'm going to talk about the To Ma Bong Sao, or step slide wing arm deflection. Now this introduces us to To Ma footwork. What it does is shows us how to step and slide. And the timing of the 2 feet is crucial here. Now in its most basic form, To Ma step slide, what you're actually doing is you're like stepping from your stance X amount of distance and then sliding the same amount. So you'd be going step 6, slide 6, or step 1, slide 1. So you slide your feet back into position the same way they started out, and in the same relationship to each other they started out in. Now in this particular move though, what I'm doing is I'm going step, slide to the side. And the timing of my hands to feet is a little bit different than you might expect. You might think that it goes step, slide bong, but it actually doesn't. What you're doing is you're going step bong, slide, Chum Kyu down, step bong, slide. And that introduces you to the idea of the lunging Bong Sao. Now, before I get into that, let me go back and talk about the step slide timing. First off, normally when I would step slide, what I'm doing is gathering power with the step and then sliding up to capitalize on the momentum. So if I was going to do like a one-syllable technique like a punch, I'd probably want to go step, slide punch, gathering the power, and then letting it fly with the second syllable. If I was going to do a two-syllable technique like a double punch, I'd probably go step with the first one, slide with the second. So it'd be like step, slide. See? And this way you'd capitalize on the momentum of both of them. Now, like I said before, in this particular portion of the form, from the Chum Kyu motion, you're going step, bong, slide, which is teaching you to sort of lunge step with your Bong Sao. Now that's used, for example, to create what we call the leakage attack, which I've talked about a lot in the prior tape series. But the leakage attack is really introduced by this motion. And this is showing us how bong defeats bong. Because what happens when I punch and Kenny uses bong sao, what I can do is defeat bong sao by forming my own bong sao and doing that lunging step from the Chum Kyu form, and at the same time turning that into a punch. And that's called the leakage attack. So at speed, that would look like that there. All right, another time I would use the leakage attack would be in sticky hands. For example, when Kenny tries to do the Chang Dai Jiang attack on me, and I use my Gang Da to respond, here, there's a chance for me to leak in again. Now, the idea of the Toma footwork that I've been talking about and plugging in sort of different techniques with Toma footwork brings to mind the concept of modularity, the fact that you can plug in different Wing Chun techniques with different footwork. I could do Toma with Bong Sao, for example, or I could do Toma with Tan Da here. I could do it with Jet Da. I could mix that footwork with any different Wing Chun hand technique because it doesn't affect my upper body. It doesn't dictate what my upper body can do. It only brings me closer with more power to the opponent. All right, next I'm going to talk about Chao Kun, or the drilling punch. Now, what I'm going to do here with the Chao Kun is kind of use a very tight pivot of my hips and a small pivot of the feet to add some power to that punch. It's called Chao Kun, which means drilling punch. It can also be called Jun Kun, which means twisting or drilling punch. Now, what I'm actually doing here is dropping my elbow and going into the uppercut with a little bit of foot pivot and a lot of hip pivot. Now, this does not violate the way that we analyze the pivoting or rotation of punches. Like I talked about in Siulim Tao, how the higher you punch, the more you have to turn your fist upward to expose those three knuckles. And as you go lower, you've got to twist it downwards to keep those three bones lined up with the hand. But in the Chao Kun, because of the fact that my elbow is not fully extended, I can still have that same kind of solidity in my punch. Whereas if I were to fully extend it, that would violate because I'd be hitting with my knuckle edge. But when it's bent like this, I'm still allowed to have my fist turned palm up. Now there's two versions of Chao Kun. One finds its roots in the Tan Sao motion, and that is to punch almost straight out, which is the way it appears in this form. But if I were to mix it with Pao Jiang, you know that I could then uppercut this way, upward. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to use the Chao Kun. Now, first of all, you could use it when John comes in, let's get open, as a sinking bridge. Because say after his jab, when I bong here, what I could do is leak up underneath. See, what John expected here was for me to come up and over the top probably, and he was expecting to use his own Wu Sao or whatever else to stop it. But instead of that, once I came here, I just used the Lan Sao from earlier in the form to pull him across and open, and that enables me to leak upwards. Now, another way that I might use that same movement would be in Chi Sao, if I were to use like a triple uppercut type of motion. So from the roll, here from Bong Sao, what I did here was come right off 1, 2, and then 3 uppercuts. So there's another way of using the uppercut. Now, also in sticky hands, sometimes what I'll do is I'll shoot the Bu Sao here, and then I'll use the Lan Sao to open up the rib and attack on that line there. So I can use it in that way. And earlier I showed you another way of using the Lan Da Chao Kun from your bong by pulling and going into the uppercut there. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Chop Kun, or it's also known as Chun Ging Kun, which means inch power punch. Wing Chun's famous for that 1-inch punch, and this is where the idea comes in. Because from right here, you just have that little bit of twist and pop, and you use a little bit of your hip to get the power, and try to drive that hip behind that short punch. Now, the way we use this movement is as a leakage attack. Now, for example, if we're open, and I threw a jab and Pep used Jam to stop it, that's when I would leak down with that Chop Kun. So it feels the resistance, so I just move in on the open line. So it's another version of the leakage attack. Now, it could be a leak in another way. If I had done the Jam Sao against his jab here, I could leak right over the top that way with it. And that'll take the wind out of his sails a little bit. All right, now I could use the exact sequence from the form where I went bong, uppercut, then leak in sticky hands. For example, when we're rolling here and I go for the uppercut and he used Jam to stop me, then I could leak through. Now what happened was I used the same motion from the Chum Kyu form because I tried to go with the leakage uppercut, but when he stopped me, then I just went through that gap and right through the middle and leaked in that way. All right, next I'm going to talk about Jing Ma Lap Fuk, or turning back to the center and using Lap Sao to grab. Okay, this again shows how to use Yi Ji Kim Young Ma as a fighting position, because that grab coming back to center would simulate standing sideways versus the opponent. For example, if we're open and I've done a cross with a full turn and Keith blocked it, then what I do is Jing Ma Lap Fun. So this is the same thing. I turn back to center so as not to give him my back, and at the same time I pulled him into that cross strike. Now, another way that I might want to go with that movement is to use that as a jerk into a follow-up. So the same situation, you know, if I had pulled here, pulled him into that would jerk him into another strike. So what I did was, you know, I hit, then I pulled back, and I used this to kind of load up and jerk him right into a follow-up strike. So I could use it in that way. So when you hit with this movement, or you grab and punch with it, it's called fan da, as in bridge it, I guess. Now, an example of that is when we're open, and if Keith does bong sao, but his wu sao guard is up a little too high, what I'll do is fan it over and trap it. See, I don't want to sweep him though, because he might fall down. But what happened is, I stopped the punch here, or rather he stopped my punch there, and then I came across and almost tapped myself on the shoulder with this hand. See? And then I reach across and trap punch, then re-trap and hit again. Now that fan sao movement is also one of the switches in lap sao, which you'll remember from my previous tape series. When we're doing the lap sao cycle, every now and then I'll just fan it over from one side to the other. So that's one of the fan sao switches. I also use fan sao sometimes as sort of a follow-up to a stop kick. Let's say we're open, and if Keith would have done a 1-2, and if I stopped him here, I use that fan sao on the way down. And what I did here was I went stop the first one, stop kick here, then on the way down, see, my arm was already loaded up for that fan sao stop here. Another time I'll use it is just to catch a punch coming in quick out of thin air. Let's say we're open and I had led in by, you know, a side kick. Then when he tries to cross, I can catch that and finish him up. So again, slow motion, see, I kicked, boom, and then when that came in, I could trap it out of thin air. So fan sao can kind of catch up to a punch coming in when you have your hand chambered backwards. Now we can develop that skill of catching a fast punch coming in the Yet Fuk Yi drill, where we'll start out pivoted here, where I go bong, fan da, bong, bong, fan da, bong, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, next I want to talk a little bit more about tut sao after the Jing Ma Lap Sao. That scraping down motion here afterwards could also simulate a follow-up from the Jing Ma Lap. For example, if I had thrown the punch and Gavin did bong, and then I did a fan sao to bring it over, that shows me how to bring the chop in directly after the fan sao. So example would be, again, here, here, and then all in one motion. All right, now we're getting into part 3 of the form, and it begins with what's called Teo Jing Gyeok, or jumping front kick. Now what happens is I pivot, slide up, and then throw the kick out. Now I won't worry about the way I land just yet. I'll talk about that later. But I pivoted my stance, slid up, and then threw the kick. Now my feet are kind of turned out in 2 different directions, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Now when Kenny comes in and we're closed, basically what this does is it enables me to close the gap, or close the distance between us. See, if I tried to kick off my front leg right now, I'm going to come up well short. So by sliding in, it's a quick way to close the gap and go in for the front kick. So it slides in to close the distance. Now, when I come in, you notice that I slide in and I turn my foot outward like this when I go to hit him in the knee. Now, the reason for that slant, there's really 2 main reasons. The one main reason that we do slant the foot is it sort of has to do with crossing the T, because the leg is a fairly slim target. And if I try and match that slim target with a slim attacking motion, it's very easy to sort of glance off. It's easy to miss and slide off one way or the other. So by crossing the T, what you're doing is building a little bit more forgiveness into your kick, so that if you miss a little bit, you'll still probably get some of the meat of the leg into it. It also is very similar in nature to the way I talked about the rotation of the palms at Siulim Tao level, because you always rotated your palm to expose the strong part of the palm heel for the hit. And the same thing with our kick. What I want to do is I want to land that kick with my heel, because that's where the bone structure lines up the best. I don't want to use the ball of my foot in Wing Chun. Now that's not to say it's not an effective kick, but Wing Chun doesn't do it, because we feel that it'll cushion, the way we kick, it'll cushion the structure a little bit and absorb some of the blow. So what we want is to use the heel in the same way that we would use the heel of the hand. So turning the feet helps that happen. Now we can take that same principle of skipping or jumping kick and we could change to other kicks. For example, I could skip into a side kick, to jack the knee. Or I could skip into a round kick, which would hit the back of the thigh, or it could, if he was the other way around, could hit the groin. If we're open like this, I could skip into a reverse round kick. There's a number of different ways that you could use this jump kick to help close the gap with a number of different kicks. All right, next I'm going to talk about the way I plant my foot down with a cross stomp, which is called Lao Sat So, or cross knee lock. Now, the first way that I use the Lao Sat So, it looks funny and you think, well, that doesn't look like Wing Chun to me. But actually it has a lot to do with range and building momentum. Now, first of all, as far as momentum is concerned, what I'm doing after the first kick is putting my foot down in such a way that I'm like twisted and just ready to fire that second kick. Your body's just wanting to do it. Now, the main importance here is to develop the range between you and your opponent. Let's say we're closed. Now, if I had scored the first shot against Bobby, say against the leg, if I plant normally forward like this, what's going to happen is it's going to be awfully close for me to try to kick him again. It's a little bit difficult for me to get in that second kick. So instead, what I might want to do here is, by kicking here and planting close, I can then set up the range a little bit better to score a second shot, you see? And it's adjustable, because let's say I had kicked Bobby in the body with the first kick and he kind of flies back a little bit. I can kind of plant a little bit more forward before I go in with that second kick. See? If he didn't move at all one bit with the first kick, then I can plant close and still score that second shot. Or if we were closed like this, say for example I had kicked here, he didn't move here, I could just use that second shot as a knee strike. So I use it this way. Now you can also use it as a knee lock. Let's say we're open. For example, if I had, say, kicked down low with reverse round kick, I could have planted here. Then I could use that to reverse sweep out. See? So that you can use that to get set up to pull out his leg. Now finally, another way I like to use this is that Lao Sat So is to develop the momentum for a kicking sequence. You can practice to help develop the speed and snap of your kicks. Now, a little kicking sequence I developed that's based on the Chum Q form, I do like this. I start out position here, and then I would go front, side, round, reverse, and then pivot through. Again, that goes front, side, round, reverse, and then pivot through. Then later on I add hands to it. I'd go like change the guard, front kick, plant close, bong, side kick, plant close, pak, round kick, plant close, change the guard, reverse round, double punch. So it looks like front, side, round, reverse, double punch. Elvis has left the building. Elvis has left the building. Oh, all right, that's all for now. So until next time, this is Randy Williams saying, "Lop me tender." If you'd like to learn more in depth about the drills and techniques shown in both this tape series as well as my previous series, my 6-volume book set, Wing Chun Kung Fu, The Explosive Art of Close Range Combat, is available through Clean Ace Printing Press in Singapore. Smoking.